it's at that moment that we find Zarathustra on a bridge, which is another tightrope, as it were, and he's surrounded by cripples, blind men, hunchbacks, and beggars. And a hunchback asks him what redemption he can offer them for their suffering and deformities. And Zarathustra has an idea of redemption, but it has nothing to do with recompense, because the hunchback wants a recompense.
Right.
But Zarathustra, instead, he turns to his disciples and says, "Verily, my friends, I walk among men as among the fragments and limbs of men."
Beautiful.
This is beautiful because it refers to what you're talking about, the maybe even new organs, or if present humankind, if present mankind is only fragments and limbs of a whole man, then the overman would be presumably a new sort of body of the human. But for the moment, it's just fragments and limbs, and the present and the past on earth. Alas, my friends, that is what I find most unendurable. And I should not know how to live were I not also a seer of that which must come.
Yeah.
So now we get to this crux that you were referring to earlier. If Zarathustra can only live because he can see into a better future, a glorious body of some sort, but when he looks backwards at what human history has been, he is filled with revulsion himself, and he does not know how to endure it. And this is a sickness of the will, too, because he will go on saying on that very same bridge, to redeem those who lived in the past and to recreate all it was into a thus I willed it, that alone should I call redemption. But this is almost impossible to do for a human being. Why? Because willing liberates. But what is it that puts even the liberator himself in fetters? It was. That is the name of the will's gnashing of teeth and most secret melancholy. Powerless against what has been done, he is an angry spectator of all that is past. The will cannot will backwards, and that he cannot break time, and time's covetousness, that is will's loneliest melancholy. This, indeed, and this alone is what revenge is, the will's revulsion against time and time's it was.
Yeah. Before talking about the eternal recurrence doctrine in there, let's talk about the aspect of revenge that's brought up. I think the two main illnesses in Zarathustra, it seems to me, are pity on the one hand and revenge. These are the ills that so many suffer from, and that determine the way they think, the way they are in the world. I see these as both perversions or distortions of giving and receiving. Revenge is ingratitude. Something has been given to you, something has happened to you, you have this life, an event has happened, and you resent it. Rather than welcome it, rather than accept it, rather than negotiate with it, rather than embrace it in an act of amor fati or something of this sort, rather than incorporate it into your character and stylize it, you reject it and broil against it and wish for some sort of cancellation of it, for some sort of payback. It's ingratitude. It's a failure to properly receive. And pity, for its part, is a failure to properly give. Someone is suffering, and as he often says, Nietzsche, you step in with your pity and take away the singularity of their suffering from them. Suffering builds character for Nietzsche, as we know. It's the only way to build character, really. It opens up levels of feeling within you that can, at the same time, receive joy more thoroughly as well. So to give up suffering is to give up depth of character that can embrace life and feel its delight. So to step into someone and say, oh, I understand your suffering, blah, 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 is to take this uniqueness of it away from them on the one hand. And on the other, it's also, as he says, to get off your own path. You have something you need to be doing, and it's so much nicer to put that work aside and comfort someone and pity them, and to feel your own superiority over them in that act of pitying, to praise yourself for how good a friend you are by helping them out, and to take the uniqueness of it from them. So you think you're giving, and you're really taking. So pity is a failure to give properly. Revenge is a failure to receive properly, is what I would say.
Very nicely said. So clearly this notion of overcoming revenge, which is the will's revulsion against time and time's it was,
Yeah.
how can the will backwards? Well, the only way Nietzsche thought the will could find a way to will backwards is through willing what the it was forwards again in the mode of repetition. Is this how you understand the doctrine of the eternal return?
Maybe.
The eternal return of the same? That
Well,
everything that has been will be repeated eternally? Can you say yes to that?
yeah. I take it in a slightly different direction, though. I want to hear more of your view on this. Everything will return. Everything will recur. I take that to be a way of thinking particular beings, things around us. They exist like an apple, not simply here, present here. They're not simply present here. They're also somewhere in the future as well. This same apple is off in the future, and then off in the future again further. And this same apple was here in the past as we go through all of these cycles. So, but it's the same apple. I take this idea of recurrence to be a way of destabilizing the present. The present is no longer self-sufficient. It's no longer sufficient to itself. The apple isn't simply here. It's not just what's here. There's more to it. What the apple is also the apple off in the future, the apple off in the past. This present, if we think of it as a discrete moment in time, doesn't encapsulate, doesn't accommodate the apple or any particular thing. All things are stretched beyond themselves into a future, into a past, such that the present is not equatable with their existence. There's more to them than that. They themselves are opened up into this world. Zarathustra's animals say it to him, "O Zarathustra, to those who think as we do, all things themselves are dancing." That's the idea of the eternal recurrence to me, that the things themselves dance. They're untethered. They're no longer grounded in a substantialist metaphysics. They're lightened. They're allowed to dance, to play with this gravity, to be detached from an encapsulated, enclosed present. And the eternal recurrence is a way of articulating that all things are not simply what they are. The present isn't everything. They're not closed off in their present being. They're rather opened and dancing to us. And it's only the Übermensch who is himself, herself, outside of themselves, also a figure of becoming, who can interact with this world of becoming things. I think the crux is to understand becoming in Nietzsche, and to do so requires breaking with the thinking of being.
Yeah, that's very Heideggerian and very persuasive, and I would like it to correspond to what I see.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Well, the only problem I have with that, Andrew, is that the text, when Zarathustra articulates the theory of the eternal return, there's so much insistence on this point of present, this absolute punctual present, here at the gateway. All
the gateway is not
us,
a point.
What's that?
A gateway is not a point, though.
Well, he says at this point, all of the past stretches out to infinity, all the future is out in infinity, and we're right here at this punctual moment. And he seems to want to isolate that moment of presence, and deprive it of distension. I mean, it does have distension in the past and future, but and then let's look at what he says. And this slow spider, he tells the dwarf, which crawls in the moonlight, and this moonlight itself, and I and you in the gateway, whispering together, whispering of eternal things, must not all of us have been there before? And return and walk in that other lane out there before us, in this long, dreadful lane, must we not eternally return? So he seems to be proposing eternal return in a literal sense there. But of course, here's where I find that the riddle, because he calls this a riddle, almost undermines the hypothesis. Thus I spoke, and more softly, for I was afraid of my own thoughts, and the thoughts behind my thoughts. Then suddenly I heard a dog howl nearby. Had I ever heard a dog howl like this?
Yeah.
My thoughts raced back. Yes, when I was a child, in the most distant childhood, then I heard a dog howl like this. Okay, we're in the realm of repetition. I've heard it before. And I saw him, too, bristling, his head up, trembling in the stillest midnight when even dogs believe in ghosts. And I took pity. For just then the full moon, silent as death, passed over the house. And that was why the dog was terrified. And I took pity again. And then he goes on to say that at that moment, among the wild cliffs, I stood suddenly alone, bleak in the bleakest moonlight. But there lay a man. And there the dog, jumping, bristling, whining. Now he saw me coming, and he howled again. He cried, have I ever heard a dog cry like this for help? And verily what I saw, I had never seen the like. We'll get back to that phrase.